Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to the 1916 Company, and thanks for logging on. We're waking up with watches, and everything is for sale. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com, for purchase and pricing details. If you wish to sell a watch, we love to sell what we buy and buy what we sell. That's how we do business. We buy, we also trade, and sometimes we can give you a higher value on a trade than an outright sale. But if you do wish to sell, we pay cash, we pay fast, we make the process a no-brainer, and no upper limit on value paid. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Jumping straight in, here's a star from 2015. And I remember this watch originally cost about, well, depending on when it was cataloged in its first few years after launch, somewhere between $6,500 and $7,500. And frankly, it's improved. This is the cleverest of the silver Snoopies. Technically, the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch Apollo 13 45th anniversary right there. And so this is unofficially known as the Silver Snoopy II. The Silver Snoopy was an award created by NASA to be given by the astronauts to suppliers and employees of NASA who went above and beyond in superlative performance of their duties. And so an Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch was used during the Apollo 13 flight to return the crippled module and its 3 pilots back to Earth safely. In fact, there are quite a few nods to the legend and lore of Apollo 13 on this watch. First, of course, we have the 14 cells. These represent 14 seconds, timed by an Omega Speedmaster, during which the retro rockets of the craft were firing to help it regain its path to Earth. And then we have a little thought bubble from Snoopy, comic style, failure is not an option. I believe that's actually a line from the Apollo 13 movie, so perhaps not historically accurate, but like I said, legend and lore. We also have this black and white dial designed to be evocative of the Peanuts cartoons created by Charles Schulz that featured the character Snoopy the Beagle. And then we have comic style cells for the 14-second track. Look carefully and you can see that the indices are actually solid blocks of lume, and we see them almost in negative, or we read the indices negatively because there's a black block on top of each piece of lume, and we read them set against the lumed background. Now you can see Snoopy is also luminescent, and so is the tachymeter scale. Mechanically, it's a Moonwatch, which means inside this 42mm stainless steel case with sapphire crystal, we have a Lamagna-based Omega 1861. We have manual wind 48-hour power reserve, 3 Hz beat rate, cam, lateral clutch, a movement flown by NASA innumerable times. We have here a ceramic tachymeter insert, and on the back, possibly the most appealing part of the watch, we have the image of Snoopy as drawn by Charles Schulz, specifically for the Silver Snoopy Award, so Snoopy in his space suit. But you can also see, AG 925, this is a hand-engraved micro-sculpture, and it sits on an enamel base, a very dark blue enamel base with metallic elements added to create the image of the infinite cosmos behind Snoopy. And again, this is one of 1,970, and I believe it was in October of 1970 when the Apollo 13 astronauts gave the Silver Snoopy to Omega as a supplier, helping to return the crippled craft. And if you look, this combination of black and white stitched strap is also model specific. A really cool watch. Moonwatches are big. At 42mm, they must have seemed huge back in 1970. Today, they seem fairly large. I would say this watch is suitable for a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference or larger. Those who've seen the channel before know my wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference for comparison's sake. The strap is actually leather on the bottom, textile on the top, and you get a full single-fold deployant clasp. All right, a brand that I believe is undervalued and should see its stock climb due to its newly restored independence. Girard-Perregaux makes some of the most beautiful horlogerie timepieces in the business, and pre-owned, the level of depreciation is eye-watering, almost like what Jaguar and Land Rover are in cars. But what you get is on the same level as anything you'll see from AP, maybe even a little bit better. Launched in 2017, this is the Girard-Perregaux Laureato Black Ceramic Skeleton. The Black Ceramic Skeleton is still 100 meters water resistant, which is twice a Royal Oak. It features a case 42 millimeters in diameter, just about 11 millimeters thick in black ceramic, and you can see that it features the traditional faceted Laureato bezel, integration of case, lugs, and bracelet going back to the first Laureato of 1975. This is not a Johnny-come-lately design. This is a watch that was there in the beginning when this genre was still young. Now on the wrist, because you can see the lugs are canted downward, it fits really nicely on the wrist. Super flat and flush, thin by the standards of a 100-meter automatic sports watch. You can see the quality is outstanding and the fit is feather light. Taking a quick look at the dial, we'll get a little bit closer. You can see that it has been skeletonized extensively right down to the open barrel. You can see there's a free sprung balance, and I'll get this up and running and fired up. It is an automatic winder. It's based on the Girard-Perregaux caliber 1800, which is 30 millimeters compared to the roughly 26 of the old 3300. So this movement better fills the case both front and back. It does have stop seconds. You can see the motion works at center and the keyless works at the side, fully visible. We have a little running seconds hand. We have that free sprung balance with its recessed variable inertia bolts. You can see the escapement from the dial side. And if you look carefully, you can see there are quite a few places where interior angles result in a sharp crease where bevels meet. And that's very difficult to do. It's always difficult to bevel the interior of tiny parts, much more so to get those sharp interior creases. We have black polished screws, satination across the tops of the bridges. On the reverse side, we have a triple finished skeletonized rose gold rotor, and you can see this movement nicely fills up the case back. It's got a beautiful architecture to it with the barrel opposed to the balance, so from side to side it has a very symmetrical look. This is fine finish at the level of what you will get on a Royal Oak open worked, and I would say that your value proposition here is a much better one than with Audemars Piguet. But let's say you want something even lighter. Let's say you want something that's even more scratch resistant than ceramic. Well, I can offer you this. Launched in 2019 for the 2020 model year, this is the Girard-Perregaux Laureato Absolute Light, made of a combination of sapphire case with grade 5 titanium lugs. It is feather light. Well, technically a 44 doesn't feel that way. It looks about the same size as the 42 you just saw, and it's only about 11.2 millimeters thick, so it's really thin as well. The case is unbelievably robust, as only diamond can reliably scratch sapphire. And if you look, there's actually a unique sandwich construction that's a first for a Laureato, as the bezel, the case, the main plate of the movement, and the case back are all held by these screws that start from the reverse and thread their way through. Now the movement is the same that you just saw, but instead of having a black coating here, we have a gray nickel anthracite. The same quality obtains, including the same degree of interior beveling. Technical specs are exactly the same, though the watch is not highly water resistant. This one's 30 meters, the other one was 100. A fantastic piece made in only 88 pieces for the 2020 model year. It's full of surprises, including a brilliant little clasp that has a push button slider. So if you push the button, you can actually, let me see if I can capture this, you can actually move this micro adjustment in and out where the strap is pinned into the buckle. You have this little slider that locks when you release the trigger. A smart system, a fully rubber strap, a deployant clasp in titanium. This watch is both indelible and incredibly light. It actually has a little bit of lume. You can see there is a little bit of lume. The three hands will bring back the Laureato skeleton now, and you can see there is also a little bit of lume there, in fact a little bit more. So watches you can see at night. Glashütte Original, another super underrated brand. I sometimes wonder if Swatch Group knows it owns the company, because it seems to spend no money on advertising or promotion. Take a look at this. Launched in 2014, this is the spectacular 42mm rose gold Senator skeleton from Glashütte Original. This is a caliber 49-18 skeleton. So as you can see on the reverse side, an enormous movement designed to fill the entirety of the case. It has been fully skeletonized and freehand engraved. And you can see how large, broad, and properly sized for the case this movement is. Look at the solarization on the ratchet wheel. Look at the engraving, a sort of banknote or floral scrolling inside all these components. Even the tiny links between portions of the bridges have been beautifully engraved. The skeletonization, the engraving. Take a quick look. Every skeletonization features a mirrored bevel on its edge. We've got a black polished swan's neck, fine adjustment. We have a little plate on the side that's been satinated, noting 19 jewels. You can see we have both fired blued screws and polished mirrored screws, and golden chaton cups holding the drivetrain. This is an unbelievable feat of artistry, a genuine work of art that you can take with you and wear on your wrist. Look, they've even engraved and grooved the mainspring barrel. You can see the motion works at center with the minute wheel pinion driving the hour wheel. Blued hands on top, along the sides, steel, satinated, and beveled. Keyless works, including clutch springs, set lever springs, sliding pinion, and winding pinion. And this watch on a full deployant rose gold clasp, thin in profile with distinctive long arcing lugs. This is a sensation, and again, compared to what you would pay to get a Patek Philippe built this way, this is an outstanding value. Now, it does have broad lugs, so you're going to want to make sure that your wrist is no smaller than mine if you're going to wear this, because otherwise you're going to find that the lugs overlap the edge of your wrist. But while it is a broad watch, it is also a very thin watch, so you can see it sits easily on the wrist. Manual wind with a 40 to 42 hour power reserve. You will have the pleasure of winding this watch with its spectacular tactile winding quality every single morning. I think Glashütte Original is one of the most underrated brands in the business, and every once in a while they try to break out of the commercial doldrums with something that seems distinctly less German than you would expect from a state of Saxony institution dating back to 1845. So in 2022, they launched this version of their vintage 70s Chronograph Panorama date. This one has the fab green dial. Now, Glashütte makes its own movements. It even makes the tools used to make its movements, but it also has its own dial factory in Pforzheim. And so what they created was this gradient green. Now, in photos, it looks almost like a spring green or a lime green or a grass green. In person, it's more like the shades you'll find on an avocado. So it's a matte finish with a lighter green at the edge and almost a black green at the very periphery. So you can see at the edge of the hands, it's a sort of light green, and then it fades dégradé, as this is a fumé fade lacquered dial, darker at the edge. We have these indices and hands, which are blackened. We have plenty of luminescence, no shortage whatsoever. This is a sports watch, 40 millimeters in diameter in steel. You can see on the reverse side, 100 meters water resistant. The watch has a flyback chronograph movement, caliber 37-02, automatic winding, 70-hour power reserve. You adjust the date using this pusher, 2 flush discs, panorama datum or outsized date. Pull the crown, which is a screw down. You can see the watch is a hacking seconds function. The chronograph has a neat twin register layout while hiding the hours register up at 12 o'clock. It's a scrolling hour. There's also a power reserve hidden inside the running seconds, and as you wind the watch, you'll see the power reserve indicator goes from silver to black. Flip it all over. It has a couple of things I have not seen in the past. So, full deployant clasp, rubber strap, absolutely a swimmable watch. We have a combination of a column wheel for crisp feel and a vertical clutch for seamless engagement with no jump or stagger. And if you like to leave your chrono running full time, a vertical clutch is going to be perfect for you because there's no additional hazard, wear, or tear. Look at the reverse side. There's a little operation indicator that tells you whether the chronograph is on or off when you're looking at the reverse of the case. We have both polished screws, as you can see, and fired blued screws. We have stripes, we have snailing, we have black polish on a swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism, though this is a free-sprung balance, with most of the adjustments done using variable inertia bolts on the balance rim. It's a very modern movement. There is this lovely hand-finished solarization on the reduction wheel for the winding system. This might be my favorite Geo watch, other than the fantastic 31-day calendar Senator Diary. I think this would be my sports watch, and the Senator Diary would be my German dress watch, and I'd be totally happy. This is a fantastic piece. Now, at about 51 millimeters lug to lug, it does wear large, but you get a good sense of it on my 16-centimeter wrist, and I think you could wear this well on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. Again, a handmade watch from Germany. This is German watchmaking at its best, and this fab green, again, not as bright as it appears online, more of an avocado green, but who doesn't love avocados? From one fade dial to another, Moser is famous for these, fumé or smoke. Moser puts bright colors and smoke dials on many watches, but alongside high complications, the rarest line from Moser from 2016 forward was the Swiss Alp watch, designed as a comical send-up of the famous smartwatch. It is deliberately ironic, and it's self-aware. It's also very funny and beautifully made. As a result, we have that smoked fume fade starting with funky blue at the center of the dial. We have a case that, as I measure it, not including the crown, is 38.2 millimeters wide, about 10.3 millimeters thick, and 51 millimeters from lug to lug. This was a late 2016 launch for the 2017 model year, the Swiss Alp Watch S, which is what we have right here. The watch does include a hacking seconds function, and surprisingly, it's a complication, as when you flip it over, you can see caliber 324 includes a power reserve indicator. All this in white gold. We have a solid gold escapement. We have a free-sprung balance on a full balance bridge with an overcoil hairspring, balance wheel, hairspring, and solid gold escapement made in-house by Moser. And the idea here is that these difficult parts, anyone can make wheels and bridges and plates, but to make these assortment components, you really need to be tooled up and dialed in. One of the distinctions that Moser has is that it can make these parts. The movement has a 4-day power reserve. It's adjusted in a superlative 6 positions, one more than a standard chronometer, and the whole escapement lifts out as a unit with the balance, so that it can be replaced by a pre-serviced unit when it goes in for service at your regional Moser service center, so you can more rapidly return the watch to your wrist, no matter where you are in the world. You can see it wears fairly narrow across the wrist. You don't worry too much about these lugs because they're wire style like a radiomir. You look at the case and you can see the case itself is far inboard of the edge of my wrist, and even from over the top, which tends to exaggerate the width of a watch across the wrist, you can see the case is still well inboard. A really beautiful watch with almost no bezel visible from the dial side and a lovely boxed and cambered sapphire. These are discontinued. Every version of the Swiss Alp watch has been discontinued for 2 years. So these are highly sought, as Moser only made a few dozen of any given Swiss Alp watch any year that the model was available. So highly sought, really cool inside baseball Moser model there. I love Blancpain, and not just the dive watches, though I must admit that the next time I buy myself a sports watch, it will be a Blancpain 50 Fathoms. This is the reference 5050, launched in 2018, and it's just like the 5015 from 2007, with 2 differences. One, the date arguably better balanced than on other versions. It is now large, 2 digits. This is the 50 Fathoms Grande date, and the Grande date is large with twin independent discs. The other difference here is that it's satin titanium, making it very light despite being 45 millimeters. It's just under 51 millimeters from lug to lug, so when I put it on my wrist, surprisingly, it does fit, and being mostly sapphire and titanium, it is a very light watch. You can see lug to lug, it's not over the edge of my wrist, and that although it's thick, it will actually slip underneath a jacket cuff. The watch has the lovely full sapphire bezel cap. Now, there are other sapphire capped bezels. IWC, Grand Seiko, Bremont has done them, but this is a cambered sapphire, which gives it this dewdrop wet appearance, as though it's constantly glossy from a sheen of water. Truly beautiful. And the sapphire being highly scratch resistant, they can put full luminescence underneath with no danger of the luminova being scratched or abraded off the surface. So let me show you how it looks in the dark. The full bezel is luminescent, very special. Note that all 3 hands also luminescent. Listen to that ratchet. 120 click, super precise. You can see now I've got a 0 to 60 minute count up timer, better than a chronograph in my opinion, easier to read with no downstream service costs. The bezel is outstanding. It's a make or break part for any dive watch. Both the sound and the tactile sensations are awesome. Now the watch does have a quick set for the date, and of course playing with the date like this is part of the fun. I don't blame you. I would. Now, taking a quick look at the case back, this movement is based on the 1315 and the standard 50. So, although it has a different nomenclature, 6918, it's the same 3-barrel automatic 5-day power reserve, adjusted in one more position than a standard chronometer, with 3 barrels featuring phased mainsprings, so that from full wind to minimum wind, as long as it's running, chances are there's a very flat torque curve and constant torque to the escapement for precise timekeeping. And these movements are well known to run plus 0.5 seconds per day. They are extremely tough against shock, against magnetism with the silicone hairspring and anti-magnetic balance and escapement. They're also protected down to 300 meters by the water resistance of the case. There's lovely mile-wide beveling on these bridges. You can see that the jewel and screw sinks are also interior beveled. The screw heads are all black polished, and then you can see that there's a lovely snailing across the bridge with engine turning on the base plate. These are just fantastic. And this might be the most visually appealing version of the full-size 50 Fathoms today. I go back and forth between this and the titanium blue dial, but there's no doubt that with the balance of the double date, this is a much more resolved dial aesthetic. De Bethune of Laureato has been my favorite watch brand for 7 years, and for the last year, I've had the extraordinary good fortune of working for a company that bought my favorite watchmaker. Yes, De Bethune is in-house, which means its financial future is secured, and it will always be around to provide parts and service for your older De Bethune models. And that's exactly what we have right here. Now this is the De Bethune DBS here, as you can see, in white gold with silver dial, one of only 15 made like this since 2005 when the model debuted. The original DBS came out as a only watch timepiece and then later entered very limited series production. It marked the debut of De Bethune's dial side barrel bridge, escapement, and balance assembly. Very much like what you see on a DB28, but with a different kind of case, as this one is almost halfway between the later DB28s and their floating lugs and the DB1 chronograph. So you could see right here, we have the DB1's fixed ogival lugs on one side, and then we have a hinged lug on the opposite side. Now it's about 51 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, 42 millimeters wide, and only 11.3 millimeters thick. The moon phase, which is spherical, has a 122-year adjustment interval, so you set it basically and then you forget it. One half is white palladium, one half is blued steel. We have triple parachute shock protection with 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs to better protect the watch against shock, but also to more rapidly recenter the balance staff pivot into its cup jewel to resume excellent timekeeping after a shock. Twin barrels, manual wind, 6 days of power reserve. You cannot accidentally overwind it. You can also see that we have a balance that actually features a yoke design. It's non-annular, made of blued titanium with platinum masses outboard to reduce the impact of temperature change on timing, reduce the effects of aerodynamic drag on timing, and also to maximize the amount of mass in the rim itself. We also have, on the reverse side, a power reserve indicator. And then we have, on the dial side, Côte de Bethune on the dial side barrel bridge, a black polished balance bridge, media blasted base plate. You can also see there's a media blasted track for the hours and these lovely polished blue cabochon as the hours inset. We have blued hands at center, and then we have this black polished bridge with striations that acts as the anchoring point for these 2 triple parachute springs on the outer edge. Take a quick look at the deltoid barrel bridge in profile, and you can see mirror beveling as good as you'll find at any company. Grubel Forcier, Laurent Ferrier, doesn't matter. De Bethune matches them at their best. And then there's solarization on the barrels as well as the ratchet wheels. Throw it on the wrist, and this watch, which is really a hybrid of a lot of different designs, Egyptian revival, pocket watches, pendant watches. It's a lovely piece that wears surprisingly easy on the wrist. Very comfortable, very flat. In fact, it has no trouble fitting on my wrist. A really rare vintage De Bethune timepiece. But we can go back further to 2003. In its second year of operation, De Bethune created this, the DB12 calendar chronograph, 42 millimeters in diameter here. You can see this one in lush and lovely rose gold. Only a few dozen of these were created over the 2 metals offered, and so encountering either version extraordinarily uncommon. We have a lovely vogue or wave pattern cut by rose lathe on the guilloche center of the dial. It features the more traditional case of the DB1 series, where you've got conventional lugs with ogival bullet-tipped ends, a round case, a solid dial, very classical. And at this point, De Bethune was still using highly modified and finished customer calibers, so on the back we have a state-of-the-art finished Venus 175. And you could see that everything has been decorated to the nth degree with beveling, stripes, satination, perlage, anglage, blued screws, polished screws. And taking a quick look in operation, you can see the lateral clutch and the column wheel with a blued screw at its center. All of the steel components of the chronograph feature beveling on their steel flanks, satination on their steel tops, big slow beating balance on an overcoil hairspring, manual wind with a 45-hour power reserve and instantaneous jumping minutes. A very special watch. From memory, I think fewer than 3 dozen of these were created and both metals offered, making an encounter with any of them extraordinarily uncommon. The holy grail for a de Bethune collector is really a customer caliber model, for the same reason that the holy grail for a Journe collector is a brass movement. You might think customer calibers are less prestigious than manufacture, and brass seems less prestigious than gold, but you're not paying for the material, and what you're paying for is rarity. There will be no more customer caliber de Bethune watches, and those that were made in only a few dozen copies at a time when the company was building very few watches. This is really the capstone to a monumental collection of de Bethune or independence in general. The pusher feels second to none. This is column wheel chronograph at its best. If you love this watch, reach out to me. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.